Then I thought let's discuss these principally these being valuation methodologies, what we've seen in a lot of other sectors where we've done transactions, where we've done other valuations. So, I mean, if I look at power sector, 5 years ago or 3 years ago, power sector valuation used to be the most stable valuation because there was a PPA. You could see there is a funding cost that gets into the model. There is a PPA. You know the pricing, you know the cost, and it's clearly there. But thereafter, what we had, what I call a power sector bubble, where suddenly we had merchant tariff coming in. So now suddenly PPA part was only the basic piece, but most of the earnings, most of the growth, most of the profitability was coming from the merchant tariff. And we had a period in which the merchant tariff was as high as 6 to 7 rupees in some states. So there was a fantastic profitability jump over and above what a normal return would be. So earlier, while PPA provided for a 12 to 14% or 16% return on equity, with a theoretical 6 rupee price, not so theoretical in fact at that time, you could have situations where profitability was fantastic. I mean, you could just recover the cost of money in no time. And then that phase sort of went away, and now we are at the other extreme where this merchant tariff is selling at 2.5 rupees and states are still not buying. So, what has happened is 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, there's a very, very certain way of valuing power. Now there's that much more uncertainty. And the next stage of uncertainty has been captive coal. So, everybody has linkage, but it seems like government has given out more linkages than it has coal. So, will they get the coal? Will you not get the coal? If you don't get it, will you get it from abroad? What will the pricing? Pricing is so volatile. What's the pricing 3 years down the line? So, now while we still use a discounted cash flow method for doing power sector valuation, I think the volatility, the risks are significant because one has to take a call on a lot of other factors. So, traditionally, you found that banks would fund almost 70%, even now 70% or higher of a power plant, simply because the risk was so little. Any sector in which risk is little, the leverage can be much higher. But with this level of volatility coming in, we don't know how it will pan out 2, 3 years, 4 years down the line. Especially if you're going to have issues whether merchant tariff will be sold, not sold, will it be sold at a super profit, will it not be sold, will you get coal for running the plant or will they operate at a much lower PLF. Once these factors come in, then you'll find that maybe banks may have to take a more cautious stand probably. Then hotel sector is another sector which I thought I'll discuss it's a unique sector in terms of it has a very high operating leverage. So once you put up a hotel, whether 10 people coming to your hotel or 500 people staying with you, your costs are not going to be significantly variable. Your food costs will be variable. That's about it. And you still have to put up the lobby, and you have to still light the room, and you do everything, and run the laundry, and run the department. So it's a very high operating leverage model. And there's high cyclicality, which I'm going to show in the next slide. It's got good operating margins, but low asset turnover. So it takes a long time to build returns in a hotel sector. And the other part is, all other assets you find that they are depreciating. So any other, you build a steel plant, after 50 years, it will be a reasonably depreciated asset. You build a power plant after 25 years, it's a depreciated asset. Okay, need to replace. On the other hand, because of location, a lot of times you find that in fact hotels are significantly appreciating assets. I mean, you need to do some basic refurbishment and all, but it's generally a very appreciating asset. So that is why returns are spread over a very long time. In an appreciating asset, that typically happens. And so, valuation methodologies typically you can do a discounted cash flow, which we will do, or you can benchmark on what's the current basis of EV to room and EV to EBITDA. But those again depend a lot on the cycle. Sometimes the cycle is good, they are at a different level, and how people see the cycle would pan out. I just on the other hand, our franchisee chains, somebody like a Hyatt or a chain which will give out a brand, and they have a completely different model. They are completely linked mostly to revenue. They don't have any assets, and they are more available. Their availability is very limited because they are not that driven by profit, but by royalty kind of thing. So they are really valued much better on a discounted cash flow method. Now this is in 2 slides I've tried to capture 3 phases of hotel valuations. This we've been doing since every year we sort of update this and keep it for record. about. So if you look at 2005, in this time, the hotel sector was just beginning to take off. India was taking off, and there was a huge shortage of hotel rooms. So if you see EBITDAs, they were not very high. The earnings were not very good for the company, but multiples were fantastic, 17 times multiple. And EV to rooms, you can see, is one of the highest, 17.2 million. This is million per room. So 1.72 crore per room. That's the kind of benchmark that was prevailing in September 2005 for most of the hotels. Because there was a huge shortage, earnings were good, people saw that there will be a lot of growth, a lot of profitability in this sector till the demand-supply gap is taken care of. But you go down to 2008, now if you compare EBITDAs, you will find that EBITDAs are much higher for most of the companies. The EBITDAs are much higher for most of the companies. But EBITDA multiples had collapsed. The reason for that was this was the time when people saw that the recession is coming in, so these earnings would not sustain. And supply had sort of just come in, or sort of most of the supply was coming in over the next 2-3 years. So in a way, people saw that supply is coming in, demand is going down, the scenario is going to suffer. And that got reflected in the EBITDA multiples. Now, to move forward to today, today we find that if I just compare, I know you can't do it like this, but if I look at EBITDA now versus in 2007, 2008, they are lower for the room capacity that has been built in. So most of the chains have built rooms, the room inventory has grown, but that is not translated into profitability because this has been the period in which the economy has recovered. It's not that economy is not recovered, but supply, it takes 4 to 5 years for supply to come in. So what was a huge shortage in 2005-06, the supply sort of has happened in over 2009, and locations like Pune and Bangalore, Ahmedabad, which were chronically short. There were probably, you will all recall, in Pune there was hardly any 5-star hotel where you could go and stay, and now there are so many. So that sort of getting reflected in multiples. But now the EBITDA multiples are reasonable, and this is like in a falling market. EBITDA multiples are still reasonable because people believe that this is not a sustainable level of EBITDA. This is like the worst scenario of oversupply, and as supply now gets corrected, the EBITDA will move up. So EBITDA levels are reasonable, and so are EV to room. From 17.2 it collapsed to 9.8 million, and now it's 13.5 million. So there's been some level of stabilization. The market has taken a slightly more longer term view. While earlier I said that markets sometimes don't do that. They take an extreme view. But here, I think the EV per room and those benchmarks help to sort of peg the valuation better. Then another sector which is very, very challenging to value is real estate sector. This is one of the sectors in which the raw material is the value, so land holding is the value. And typically, we've seen that net asset value approach works in this, but the challenge is, somebody pointed out to me that the raw material, sometimes if you see the working capital cycle, which is you own the land and then you try to build, it can be as low as 3 years or it could be as high as 15 years. You could buy a land and then by the time you could really market it could be 15 years if you have to earn that kind of return on that. And this industry is faced by a very high cost of capital, so because banks do not lend properly, you have equity cost in high excess of 25%. So that becomes an issue here. If you do a DCF, you have to use very, very high cost of capital, and the challenge is in terms of marketability, in terms of what kind of parameters you put in. If you look at globally, if you look at India, somebody would say last 10 years, if you look at what's the return, I'm sure it would be, every piece of land would be in excess of 15%. But if you say that we'll take that to the next 10 years, then probably you'll find that every location in India would be costlier than anywhere else in the world. So what's a reasonable level of growth in prices that you should build in a model? Those are some of the issues which impact the valuation in this. So I think net asset value is one basis of doing it, and then you can just see whether you can unlock the value through DCF. That's the approach we typically use. Then another sector which is very good for DCF is consumer sector, especially where there are brands. So brands give a lot of stability to earnings. So and especially we find that the markets are very volatile. People move towards the consumer goods sector because brands give a good franchise. There is no working capital is controlled. There is no major capex. You don't need to big capex to grow, and volatility is significantly low. So what happens when you do any cash flow for a DCF for a consumer company, you find that you don't have to build in capex, you don't have to build in working capital, and the cost of equity or the cost that you would use for discounting them would be much lower. We found that one of the lowest costs of capital would be probably enjoyed by the consumer sector. They don't typically, a lot of them don't even take loans, so it's only equity, and equity costs for them, our betas are significantly low. So, there's a lot of value created. That is why you find a lot of these consumer companies are very high multiples. And that, if you compare that and you say, why would a steel be at 10 times and a consumer would be at 25, 30 times? You can see that once you run a cash flow, you see that the incremental growth in steel have to have a lot of capex, a lot of working capital, and a lot of risk, which is missing in this, which gives the higher valuation.